Hello and welcome to True Crime Rocket Science, the most authentic voice in true crime. Maddie Mogen put quite a lot of effort into her Pinterest, a total of over 2,600 pins, and then also 45 different categories, from food to fairy tales, from law of attraction stuff to rings and kiddies. In this analysis, we'll concentrate on just a handful, not only to get a better grasp on Kaylee's best friend, but perhaps how others experienced her as well. And so what we really want to do here is get a deeper sense of the fabric, the media fabric, the social media fabric that these kids were drawing inspiration from. But equally, how could this have affected somebody else indirectly? Before we get to that, if you haven't subscribed to the channel, please do. If you're enjoying this analysis and enjoying this community, there's an extension on Patreon. Go to patreon.com/TCRS, where we have discussions and commentaries, and I will obviously respond to comments and ideas directly. If you're enjoying this episode, please like, share, leave a comment, and let's get started. So it's clear that Maddie's Pinterest is sort of an altar to wish fulfillment and dreamy wishful thinking. It reminds me quite a lot of Gabby Petito's similar sort of situation, a young 20-something about to embark on their lives and thinking of how to populate their lives with certain kinds of decor and clothing and hairstyles and tattoos and aphorisms, certain statements. In the dream home category, we can see just how far Maddie was thinking ahead while already at college. And I think Gabby Petito was also thinking about things like wedding dresses. Of course, she was engaged. But the category that shouted out by far the most was the law of attraction stuff, with 66 pins, including these. You're going to get everything you daydream about. Trust in the universe. It will always provide, for me, for you, for us. Believe that everything will work out for the best at exactly the right time. Change is possible and the best is yet to come. Here's another one. If you obsess over whether you're making the right decision, you're basically assuming that the universe will reward you for one thing and punish you for another. The universe has no fixed agenda. Once you make any decision, it works around that decision. There's no right or wrong, only a series of possibilities that shift with each thought, feeling, action, and action that you experience. There's another one. Life is a party once you realize it is. Now, what happens if your attitude to life is, for example, that you think life is a party? What happens? Well, don't you interpret everything and everyone through this idea of fun? If you know fun, well, then you're not part of my life psychology. If you are a lot of fun, then you are. And so what do you need to be? A lot of fun. Anything that's not fun then is not really part of the life that I really want. Is that fair? Here's another one. Do it for yourself. What you think, you become. You'll be amazed at what you attract after you start believing in what you deserve. There are many, many more of these self-reinforcing aphorisms, all pretty much of the same theme. That the universe is dying to give you absolutely all you want. All you have to do is clear your mind and think positive thoughts. I see it, I like it, I want it, I got it. Now imagine you can apply that to shopping, but imagine applying that to someone that you like. Fair enough. Well, imagine a guy applying that to someone they like. Imagine hoodie guy saying, I see it, I like it, I want it. Sorry, you didn't get it. This is very tricky subject matter, firstly because millions of Americans, many people around the world, believe wholeheartedly in the law of attraction. Are you one of them? If you are, let us know in the comments. Secondly, it's tricky subject matter because if you criticize any aspect of it, it looks like you're blaming the victim here. You're saying, I guess, if you didn't think positive thoughts, well, then you manifested something negative, and so it's your fault. right? That is not what is being suggested here at all. And this whole sort of thought process is precisely what happened in the Watts case, where his wife was found to be a Facebook maven, someone living her life on Facebook, and everything was just these aphorisms, dreaming dreams, manifesting thoughts, and yet she wasn't able to see her husband was cheating on her. She wasn't able to do anything about a second bankruptcy. And when she suspected it, when she suspected her husband was cheating, she didn't know what to do about it except order him a self-help book and write a letter and sort of throw words at the situation. She didn't really know how to think or feel or really what to do about it. Jodi Arias also believed wholeheartedly in the law of attraction, that if you said something, you could literally almost like conjure things with words. The sort of Harry Potter school of life, where you say things and things just sort of are converted into reality because you've said something, casting a spell. The law of attraction is wonderful until the moment disaster strikes. In terms of this investigation, the law of attraction isn't going to find evidence or solve this case. Actual boots on the ground, real effort, real evidence is going to make the difference or not. Do you think if law enforcement believed in the law of attraction, that the killer would just walk into Moscow PD? Much of the fabric we see here, we also see with Shanann Watts. We see vision boards. We see this idea of consciously ignoring or dismissing negative thoughts. If someone criticizes you, just block them out. You don't need that stuff in your life, right? Also, think yourself rich. Don't take life seriously. Have as much fun as you can. If anything's not going well or not going right, if there are bills, don't pay attention to that. Just absorb and send out positive energy. Now, instead of sharing my reservations about the law of attraction, which is basically just one thing, it's unscientific, let's look at what Psychology Today says about it. They call it a metaphysical pseudoscience with conclusions based on erroneous, unfounded, and often incorrect assumptions. Law of attraction assumes that one is alone and completely responsible for any goal that is not successfully achieved, no matter how unrealistic. Law of attraction philosophy leads to apophenia, the misguided belief that there is meaning behind random data. Now, if you just, on the one hand, if you say, what harm did it do for Maddie to, let's say, believe in the law of attraction? Well, what if the killer also believed in the law of attraction? What if the killer thought that I'm believing that this relationship is going to work out, or I'm believing that my fairy tale is with this person that I'm in love with or I see a future with, and then it just doesn't happen? How do you feel when you've got all of these positive feelings and it's meant to be and it's going to work out and I must just manifest, just believe, and then it doesn't happen? What do you think that feels like? That sort of reality check. Taken further, the law of attraction rubbishes actual scientific law with regard to energy, that for every action there's an equal and opposite reaction. In normal life, it costs something to get something, and that cost or that effort may actually build character and a sense of connection with other people, with your world, also a sense of agency and effectiveness in terms of the world. It teaches you to find your place in the world, whereas the law of attraction doesn't. It simply says, by virtue of your existence, you deserve something. One of the most common beliefs you'll see on social media, and we also see it on Maddie's Pinterest, is this one. Everything happens for a reason. Inherent in that idea is that good things happen for good reasons and bad things happen for good reasons as well. There's a method to the madness of bad things happening. But who would be crazy enough to suggest that there's any kind of silver lining behind Maddie's or any rational thought process behind her murder or those of her three friends? If our response to their murders was to sigh happily and say, oh, everything happens for a reason, people would think you are grossly insensitive at best, mad at worst. There is a reason why these murders happen, but it's not the sort of thing you hand over to the universe with a grateful heart and say, I'm okay with it. Whatever you're doing, universe, I'm okay. I know you have my best interests at heart. So far, the universe seems to be on the side of the killer. Dr. Neil Farber highlights the following issues with the law of attraction in Psychology Today. He says it's based on wants, not values. It conveniently doesn't ask you to take any action, which suits social media quite well. You put up a nice magical thinking slogan, just press like, somebody else can share it, just click your mouse and you've done all you need to get that red Ferrari. It doesn't quite require any plan of action either. Just think in wishy-washy terms, and that's all you need to do. I want to be happy. I want to be rich. I want to be positive. I want successful people around me. It sidesteps actually the need for compassion and maybe even sensitivity. In the sense that the reality of life is that there are negative moments. When someone fails, when somebody dies, when there's an injury, or someone is justifiably upset about something. Choosing to ignore this is wonderful cherry-picking and selective reality, but it's clearly not reality. The law of attraction is kind of mindless and detached from the present or from reality. Now, if you're thinking, I really don't understand what any of this is about, like how does this relate to this case? Well, think about that psychology, that attitude, and the noise complaint. That is a negative moment. You know, the cops are coming to deal with a situation. What do you do with a situation like that? Well, it's not very positive, so you try and ignore it. The law of attraction suggests that if you manifest enough positivity, you can not only control your own thoughts, but control the assembly line in Italy that needs to produce and deliver your Ferrari just for you. As tempting as this idea is that you possess Jedi powers, actually you don't. Try moving the nearest pen using all your pent-up positive energy. If it moves 1 millimeter, you ought to have the world at your feet in no time. Now, I think the temptation is when you criticize the law of attraction for not working. Within the context of a crime, you are now insensitively blaming the victim for the crime. No, we're saying the law of attraction didn't work. If we want to address this idea of how the law of attraction may be some sort of mechanism related to the fabric of this case, I guess the best we can do is point out that folks who are caught up in the law of attraction aren't expected to pay much attention to negative stuff, quite the opposite. So when we think about one of these FBI agents saying, you know, these kids didn't notice anything unusual, there was nothing, it was a completely normal day, but they're not expected to pay any attention to negative stuff anyway. They're required to filter it out. That is not a good situation or strategy when someone is out there like Chris Watts or Jodi Arias or the Wolf of King Road to do you harm. If you're actively trying not to think about things that aren't nice, then you make yourself very vulnerable. If you're purposefully not thinking critically about what might be wrong or suspicious in a given already troubling situation, well, that's a recipe for rolling out the red carpet to the wolf. Now, there's a lot more to say about this, but I know there are limited attention spans on YouTube, so I'm not going to talk about, you know, if you have this belief, it actually diminishes the value of hard work and perseverance and perhaps commitment that was perhaps already shown in a relationship. But what I want you to do is imagine someone who is so positive that they're sort of floating and seeing everything through a puffy pink cloud of magic thinking. How do you try to address a real problem like a noise complaint? Let's say you're a cop and you've got to come into the situation where someone is just all positive feelings and good vibes. How do you get them to deal properly with a noise complaint? Well, the answer is you can't. They close the door in your face and they don't come back. So how do they deal with problems? They just stay in a good vibes mode. They ignore it and hope it goes away, or it becomes someone else's problem. And if you've been paying attention, you're getting a clear idea how someone besides law enforcement might be dealing with a particular philosophy, a particular psychology, not just of one person in that house, but several, on how to deal with problems, but also how to deal with other people who may have legitimate issues. Well, how do you deal with that? Well, you just close the door and sort of concentrate on your good vibes. Now, I want you to imagine a different dimension. You're struggling through a breakup or having difficulty with studies or money or your parents, or you feel someone is being selfish, all sorts of real world problems, or conversations you're having are very one-sided, or someone's not listening. Or let's say you're a hoodie guy and you want to chaperone a pretty girl back to her home. Well, you can just as easily be dismissed as all the other things that aren't part of the imaginary fairy tale. In other words, it can be experienced by others as a kind of toxic positivity, where anything and anyone that doesn't fit into your setup of whatever is your fairy tale is invalidated. Negative feelings and moods are real, and just because you're too positive to deal with someone else's reality doesn't make them or their reality any less material. Also, not dealing with difficult problems can lead to a selective reality problem similar to schizophrenia, or such a cold lack of empathy that it may approach psychopathy. The real problem with living in a dream world all the time is that when reality comes knocking, you have no idea how to deal with it. And think about the reality coming knocking in a situation like breaking up with somebody. That is reality coming knocking. Our relationship's over, but I can't actually deal with how unhappy you feel about it. So you must just deal with it on your own time. I also think it needs to be said that all of these self-reinforcing statements are nothing if not highly, highly narcissistic. You know, you hear about narcissism being evil, but it seems like you can't look at these statements and say, wow, all of these are really narcissistic. It's all about me, I, and you are simply a means to that end. And if you're not, well, then you need to leave, kind of thing. It's also my fairy tale above all. And fairy tale is another category on Maddie's Pinterest. It's interesting that Maddie's fairy tale is themed around one thing and one thing only. Not a job or a home or a particular adventure, but around romance. We can see some of the inspiration on Pinterest wasn't only shared in terms of the design of the interior of the funhouse, but even the Idaho, I think, Alpha Pi sorority were following on Pinterest, although I think that was Kaylee's Pinterest account. But we see similar design elements from Pinterest inside the funhouse, such as the fairy style lighting. Now, again, especially if you're a guy, you might be thinking, this is all absolute garbage. Except that this is part of the fabric of a girl's life, where not only is it her psychology, but she's taking some of those ideas, those fairy tale thoughts, and she's actually bringing it into her bedroom as part of the design of her home, as a reminder that I want to float through life and I want to have the happiest life possible. I'm not going to entertain any negative energy. And if you think about it, something incredibly negative, more negative than has happened in 7 years in Moscow and even beyond that. There was basically an explosion of negative energy. What put the pressure cooker on that kind of energy? What didn't allow that negative energy to land on its mark kind of in a normal way? Now, in the image below, you can see just how easily vehicles on the elevated parking lot can be seen, and vice versa, inside the bedroom with its transparent curtains. The other thing with this whole fairy tale thing is, to someone else, it looks and feels like a fairy tale. So it looks soft and fluffy and pink and sweet and all those kinds of things. And it's all good vibes. The problem is when things go south, then it's actually a tyranny where anything that doesn't quite fit into that softness is basically expelled in quite a harsh and cruel way, right? So as long as you're inside the cocoon, everything's warm and fuzzy. But the moment you expelled from that fairy tale, it's a harsh world filled with sharp edges. I want to quote one more source in this regard. It's mic.com. It says, focusing only on the positive could also compromise authenticity in our relationships, discouraging us from expressing hurt. So if you can't express hurt or anger or other negative emotions, what happens? Well, it bottles up, it builds up, and then it needs to actually come out. And isn't that what happened here? Someone felt hurt, but they weren't able to express it. Why not? Well, this might be part of the answer. So going back to this article, such a relentless focus on positivity might in turn lead us to value ourselves only when we exude positivity or achieve success. I think there's another way of interpreting that. Such a relentless focus on positivity means we may only value ourselves. And anyone who starts being negative suddenly has no value. Neither do their arguments. They kind of automatically get sent to the outbox. And that brings us to the bottom line. How do you break up with someone and deal with a negative aftermath if you're all caught up in being positive? How do you break up with someone, and how are they supposed to deal with you if you can't be real or say anything about how you feel? Could this not have led to feelings of crushing frustration and teeth-grinding bitterness? Is that what happened here? Thank you for listening, and I'll see you guys next time.